Happy Easter once again, everybody, and Tony here. And as promised, here's my review of Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, which I caught at the Praha Statni Opera. The conductor was Vaclav Jaradnik. The choreography and direction were handled by Peter Suska. The scenography was done by Jan Dušek. The costumes were handled by Roman Scholz. The set design was handled also by Peter Suska, alongside Pavel Dautovsky, and the assistant choreographers were Teresa Podarilova, Alexei Afanasyev, Mikhaila Cherna, and Radek Vratil. Now, what more can I say about Romeo and Juliet? Well, the original Shakespeare version. It's a timeless love story. Yeah, people may think it's overrated, people might think it's wonderful, and some people are kind of, burnt out by it. But in my opinion, it's sort of like one of the most popular love stories that kind of helped popularize the romance and the love story elements that we usually see in a lot of romantic films and any types of other media. Well, the first one being Tristan and Isolde. And ever since then, Romeo and Juliet has been adapted into several works, ranging from operas like Gounod's Romeo et Juliet, Bellini's I Capuletti e Montecchi, and Sandonai's Giulietta e Romeo, and also this ballet, obviously Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, alongside several film adaptations and a Broadway musical adaptation in the form of West Side Story. But I'm not going to review any of those yet. As said, I'll be reviewing Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. Now, the funny thing is that I caught this opera back when I was in Cebu, Philippines, when I was 11 years old, and I watched it with my sister and my maternal grandma, alongside a few colleagues that I caught in my grade school years. And the only thing I could remember about this opera was the music. Basically, the musical numbers that go dun da dun da 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 or something like that. And I didn't know the name of the dancers back when I was watching this as a kid, but I could still kind of remember the music, and it somehow ended up being refreshed as I watched this at the Praha Statni Opera. So with that out of the way, let's get on to what I thought about the production, the dancers, and the conducting. Now, with the production, it was basically, I hate to sound like a broken record. It's not necessarily minimalist, but it's, dark. It's completely black in a lot of the scenes, except for a few scenes where there's some color added here and there. And there are some platforms used throughout the stage, and especially in the beginning, we see Friar Lawrence and Queen Mab. Now, these two ended up playing a huge part of the story. It's a constant battle between life and death, man and woman, light and darkness, yin and yang. It's a constant struggle. It's not just a love story between our star-crossed lovers. It's just simply put a battle between light and darkness. Friar Lawrence representing life and sometimes the harsh realities of life and even darkness, and Queen Mab sort of representing light and saying that, everything will get better, and sometimes representing death as well. Because as I've seen, there were moments in which Queen Mab came into the scenes between Mercutio's and Tybalt's battle with each other, and she enters the scene and whisks Mercutio away from the mortal world as he dies on stage. And I thought that was really fascinating and really interesting, instead of the usual sword fight that we get from them. And instead of, Romeo taking the poison and then Juliet stabbing herself, it's Queen Mab, or basically it's Romeo who takes the hand of Queen Mab, and then he lets himself die, and it's Juliet who ends up taking the hand of Queen Mab, and then she dies. Well, I think it's also because it's to give Queen Mab a more Grim Reaper-like role in this production, which I find really interesting. And Friar Lawrence may be the sort of father figure, or basically the mentor figure to Juliet, but he's not always consistently seen on stage. It's actually Queen Mab that also tells the story in pretty much her perspective. And speaking of Queen Mab, we also see some of the subtitles on stage saying, "Oh, Queen Mab presents," and then we see the comedy and the prelude of what happened before Romeo and Juliet actually starts, which I found very interesting. So overall, I have to say that the production was, simply put, breathtaking, and I was in complete awe by it. It was interesting, to say the least, and to see Queen Mab have such a substantial role as a sort of Grim Reaper-like figure sort of adds not just an air of mystery and a sort of mysticism to it, but also sort of adds a little bit of a dark element to her, which I thought was fascinating. And now let's get to the dancers. Juliet was performed by Andrea Krameshova. I thought she was brilliant. She not only looked the part, but she played the part very well. She was so convincing as a teenage girl, and I was quite surprised that she was able to. I wasn't really just surprised, but it was just beautiful of how she portrayed Juliet. She was able to portray her girlish nature. She was able to portray her coquettish and very sweet nature as well. And she was agile. Definitely a very agile prima ballerina. And it was just, simply put, wonderful. It was just a very fascinating performance that was so magnificent. And even her chemistry with the Romeo of the evening, who was Francesco Scarpato, was just gorgeous. And speaking of Romeo, Francesco Scarpato added a very lively, virile, and very much a very masculine and very boyish portrayal to Romeo. He was able to make Romeo a very youthful and very, very much, lively character. He was able to be alive through this character. And like I said, his chemistry with Andrea Krameshova was flawless. It was just so flawless. And then we have Queen Mab, danced by Miho Ogimoto. She was able to portray that sort of Grim Reaper-like and that Greek chorus-esque feel to her. She was a very agile dancer and extremely wonderful. And not to mention, her costume was just gorgeous. It added a sense of mysticism and a sort of mysteriousness to her character, and a sort of enigma as well. So she was able to portray that enigma very convincingly. Now, Friar Lawrence was done by Alexander Katsapov. Wow. Very brilliant dancer. And it's actually very impossible to make a very handsome man like Mr. Katsapov look any older. Still, he was a very agile dancer, very virile, and it was just a wonderful portrayal. And then Mercutio was done by Matej Shust. He was able to add a certain impetuousness, rowdiness, and a certain energy to his character, which I thought was very captivating. He was able to make this character come so alive and make him breathe, and, it was just flawless. It was just flawlessly done, and I was totally impressed and blown away. Tybalt was done by Marek Svobodnik, who was able to give a certain air of arrogance, pride, and a certain type of dignity to his character, which I really liked. And then one of the like Montagues was done by Sophie Benoit, a very great dancer, alongside Yeri Kodim as one of the Capulets. And then we have the comedians, done by Irina Burduya and Gian Vito Attimonelli, alongside the very young dancers Mikula Shlishka, Makoto Okayama, Elizabeth Suvova, and Karolina Filipova. Now, even though their part was mainly filler, I still have to say that they were able to make great use of their filler role and just danced the heck out of their parts. Still, even though their parts were mainly filler, it was still captivating to see them perform their hearts out. And the conducting done by Maestro Vaclav Jaradnik was just absolutely gorgeous. It was able to make me feel like refreshed and have my memory refreshed of how the music was going to sound like. So overall, it was just absolutely wonderful. Everyone did their part, and it's also thanks to the great conducting done by Maestro Jaradnik. So it was just awesome overall. What more can I say about the ballet production as a whole? It was just awesome. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow where I'll take a look at, just a second, let me look at my review schedule, and let's see. Okay, so tomorrow I'll be looking at Janaszek Sienufa, which is going to be shown at the Praha Narodny Theater. So I'm actually very excited for that. And since I'm here in Prague, I think it actually makes sense that I see one of my favorite Janaszek operas at this very opera house. So until then, I hope you all had a very happy Easter, and good night, everybody.